Right now, the device you are reading this on owes its existence to a man you have never heard of. During the darkest years of the Second World War, he built the first machine in history that could think the way modern computers think. It helped break Hitler's most secret code. It helped win the war. And then his own government ordered the machines smashed, the drawings burned, and the man who built them sworn to silence for the rest of his life. Some people change the world, and the world never learns their name. This is without whom. His name was Tommy Flowers, and he was born just before Christmas in 1905 in a working-class corner of East London called Poplar. His father was a bricklayer. There was no money for grand schooling, no famous name to open any doors, and no one in his world who built machines for a living. But Tommy was a boy who took clocks apart just to see how they worked. He apprenticed as a mechanical engineer at the Royal Arsenal, and at night, after a full day's labor, he caught the train across London to study electrical engineering at evening classes. He did it year after year, with his own small wages, until he finally held a university degree no one in his family had ever held before. In his 20s, he joined the British Post Office and was sent to a quiet research station on the outskirts of London, in a place called Dollis Hill. There, he became obsessed with a small, glowing object that most engineers thought was a curiosity at best: the thermionic valve. A glass tube, no bigger than a light bulb, that could control the flow of electricity itself. Almost everyone agreed valves were too delicate for serious work. They burned out. They failed. They could not be trusted. But Tommy noticed something strange. The valves only seemed to fail when they were switched on and off. If you left them running, hour after hour, day after day, they kept going. He had stumbled onto a quiet secret about a tiny piece of glass, a secret that would one day help win a war. By the late 1930s, he was using thousands of these valves to build advanced telephone exchanges that few engineers thought were possible. And then the world fell apart. By the early 1940s, Britain was fighting for its life. In a country house north of London, a hidden team of mathematicians was racing to break Hitler's secret messages. They cracked one famous code, and the world later learned of it as Enigma. But there was a second code, far more dangerous. It was used by Hitler himself, by the very top of the German command, to send orders for the entire war. And it was beating them. To attack it, the code breakers had built a noisy, clattering contraption of paper tapes and spinning wheels. It worked, just barely. It was painfully slow. Every day it took, more soldiers died. And it was here, in 1943, that a quiet engineer from the post office was brought in to take a look. Tommy Flowers proposed something almost no one in the room believed was possible. He would build a machine made entirely of valves, thousands of them, working together with no moving parts at all. It would read code at electronic speed. It would do in hours what the old machine took weeks to do. Most of the experts told him he was wrong. Bletchley's leaders said it would never work. The machine would be enormous. The valves would burn out. It would take a year to build, and the war could not wait. The answer, politely, was no. So Tommy Flowers did something that takes a kind of quiet courage we rarely see. He went home and started building it anyway. He told no one in authority what he was doing. He simply set to work, in the quiet hope that when he was finished, the machine would speak for itself. Back at the post office, with a small team and quietly using his own money to make up the difference, he and his engineers worked through the days and through the nights. They wired together more than 1,500 glowing valves into a single room-sized machine. They named it Colossus. In December of 1943, Colossus came alive. Within weeks, it was at Bletchley. Within weeks more, it was reading messages from the very top of the German army. Soon, Tommy was building a second, even more powerful version, with 2,400 valves. It was working by the 1st of June, 1944. The Allied invasion of Europe was 5 days away. In those final days before the landings, Colossus broke a message that may have decided everything. Hitler had been tricked. He believed the invasion was coming to the wrong part of the French coast, and he was holding his armies there to meet it. The intelligence reached the Allied commander. The order to go ahead was given. The largest seaborne invasion in history sailed for Normandy with a confidence it might never have had. Without that order, the war in Europe might have lasted another year or two or more. By the end of the war, 10 Colossus machines were running at Bletchley, breaking message after message, shaving months off the conflict. Historians believe Tommy Flowers and his team helped save countless lives and ended the war earlier than anyone had dared to hope. He had built the first programmable electronic computer the world had ever seen. And then, the order came. Almost as soon as the fighting stopped, the British government decided that Colossus and everything about it must vanish. The Cold War was beginning. The methods used to break Hitler's code might one day be needed against another enemy. The decision was made at the very top. Tommy Flowers' life's work was to be erased. He was made to do it himself. The machines were broken into small pieces. The blueprints, the diagrams, the notes from years of work, all of it was thrown into the fire. Tommy stood and watched as his giants were reduced to scrap. And then the silence began. For everything he had built, for the lives saved, for the war shortened, Tommy Flowers was quietly handed a single payment of £1,000. It was less than what he had spent of his own money to make Colossus work. He divided most of it among his team, and he was told he could never speak of it. Not to his colleagues, not to his friends, not to his wife, not even to his own 2 sons. For decades to come, the law would forbid him from telling anyone what he had done. They knew only that their quiet father had been involved in some kind of secret war work, important somehow, but they did not know what. His own sons grew up not knowing that the man who tucked them in had built the first thinking machine the world had ever seen. He went back to the post office and to ordinary engineering. He once asked the Bank of England for a loan to build another machine like Colossus in peacetime for the public good. The bank politely told him such a machine was impossible. He could not tell them he had already built 10. And he watched, year after year, as other countries unveiled their first computers to thunderous celebration, and the world began to repeat the story that one of those was the first. It was only in the 1970s, more than a quarter of a century after the war ended, that the British government began to lift the veil. Slowly, the truth came out. Tommy Flowers, now an old man, lived to see his name return from the dark. Honors came. A doctorate from Newcastle University came. A small museum was built to remember what he had done. He died in 1998, 92 years old, having finally seen the world begin to remember. Every modern computer, every phone in every pocket, traces a thread back to a quiet engineer in a cold room at a quiet research station who built the impossible in a hurry and then watched it taken from him. The world you live in was built by people you have never heard of. And now, you know one more name: Tommy Flowers. Like and subscribe and stick around, because the textbooks left a lot out. Thanks for watching.